Hello, everyone. My name is Kathy Crane, and I'm a Regional Director for APDA. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this session entitled Improving Function with Assisted Technology. Our special guest is Dr. Bob Cunningham. Dr. Cunningham is the director of the Maryville University Occupational Therapy Program, and he specializes in the area of technology. Dr. Cunningham, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Kathy. Thank you for that introduction. And to APDA, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I've been fortunate to have this opportunity to speak at some of these meetings before, so I'm happy to be back. It's always interesting as we get older, what happens or what comes up. And I became aware this morning that an old friend, a person who gave me one of my first jobs in working with people with disabilities in 1985, is attending the conference today. So a shout out to my friend Georgianne. Look forward to catching up with you sometime. So I am an occupational therapist by trade, and I'm going to be giving you that perspective today. Occupational therapists are a professional group that can really be helpful to persons with Parkinson's in terms of problem solving with a variety of areas, but also recognize there are other professionals that work in the area of assistive technology, such as speech and language, physical therapy, rehab techs and aides, and assistive technology practitioners in general. So please keep that in mind. Our objectives today in our session are to review assistive technology options to assist primarily with computer access, mobile phone and tablet access, environmental control, and communication. There are certainly many other areas, but these tend to be the ones that folks have sought out information from me in the past, and so I thought that we'd make this the focus. They tend to be pretty practical and can impact a wide variety of a person's daily occupations. So what is assistive technology? Well, what you see in front of you is the legal definition that appears in a number of different pieces of legislation, including the Americans with Disabilities Act and the original Rehabilitation Act or Assistive Technology Act. And it says it's any item, piece of equipment, or product system, whether acquired, off the shelf, modified, or customized, that's used to increase or improve the function of a person with disabilities. What's really important, and I hope you will take away from the presentation today, is that if it's something that can help improve your function or help you do something better or safer, it's assistive technology. This definition and the specifics of it really are about the legalities and reimbursement, and recognizing that most of the things we'll talk about today, many of them are not reimbursed by insurance. Wheeled mobility, powered mobility, those things tend to be, but most of the other items we're going to be talking about today are things that people have to pay for out of pocket and or look for lending agencies or lend and loan or recycling places as well, and or our friend Amazon and other online shopping stores, okay? So AT, or assistive technology, as far as it is concerned by persons with Parkinson's, can address a number of areas. And this isn't exclusive to persons with Parkinson's. It could be a person with MS or a hip replacement, but some of the primary areas that AT is used, specifically from an occupational therapy perspective, are cooking, eating, dressing, issues related to using the bathroom, toileting, and bathing, computer access, mobility, communication, and organizing. And we're going to focus, as I mentioned during my objectives, on just a few of those today. So we all recognize the important role that computers and computer devices, tablets, and phones play in our lives today. As an occupational therapist and an educator, I really emphasize with our students to think about how many different things, how many occupations are impacted by our ability to use a computer or use a cell phone or tablet. If it's ordering food, making reservations, buying tickets, communicating with friends, giving a presentation, doing office work, the list goes on and on and on. And the thing about all those tasks, while they might be different, they all share the interface or how it's accessed by the person who's using the computer or that phone. And so I'm going to talk to you today about some alternatives or adaptations that can be made to possibly make it easier or more effective for a person with Parkinson's to use the computer. So I've got visuals for most of these. The ones I'm showing you are some of the more popular ones, but there are always others out there. Huge disclaimers. I don't represent any company or sell anything for anybody. I often will just recommend things that I've seen work for friends or patients or clients in the past, right? So one of the most common alternatives for computer access is using a different keyboard. So obviously when you buy a computer, it comes with a standard keyboard, but please note there are a number of other varieties or types that are out there that might benefit a person with Parkinson's. We all recognize that a primary concern for persons with Parkinson's is incoordination or tremors, fine motor manipulation with using hands. And so using a standard keyboard can at times be a challenge. So there are keyboards out there that are referred to as large key keyboards, and you see an image of this one here with the yellow keys, and the keys are larger and the labels are larger. Some models also increase the spacing between the keys, so you don't run the risk of accidentally striking other keys as much. When looking for these, Amazon is a good place to start, but I think just using a search on a search engine like Google is even better sometimes, is recognizing that there are large labeled keyboards and there are large key keyboards. And large labeled ones typically are still like a standard keyboard with the same size keys, but the labels on them are bigger. That also could be a benefit to somebody, but I'm particularly looking for something that has a larger key, and ones typically that are 1 inch by 1 inch square of what we're looking for, okay? A related item to this is something called a key guard, and you see this here. Key guards are becoming harder and harder to find, but I think they still exist. And actually, I did some searching today just to make sure that we could still find one. And again, using a Google search, I was able to find a key guard. And what is it? It's typically a plastic sheet that sits over the top of a keyboard. And what it does is it requires the user to drop their fingers through the hole that we see here over the key to then access it. And the whole purpose of it, well, there's two. One is to give the hands a place to rest above the keys so you don't have to hold them up. But then the other is to require the person to drop their finger through the hole to touch the key. Please recognize that when a key guard is used, folks typically won't go back to a touch typing or 10-digit typing thing. It would be more of a hunt and peck typing using individual index fingers. Okay. Next up is using a whole nother approach. And that other approach has become very popular in recent years because the technology has improved so much, and that's speech recognition. So on the screen here, you see a commercial product that's called Dragon Naturally Speaking or Dragon Professional. It's about $600 and probably recognized as the premier speech recognition tool out there. But please recognize that now computers now come with this built into operating systems. So both the Macintosh platform and the PC platform through Windows platforms offer speech recognition built in. Also, we're seeing speech recognition being built in as an option into word processors that are available as well. So if you like Google Docs, Google Doc has a dictation feature that you can use that's incredibly effective. Works really well, and you can access that through a computer or a tablet. And then the online version of Microsoft Office or Office 365 also has an excellent speech recognition tool built into it. The real challenge here is becoming comfortable using speech as a way to enter information into the computer. And I always offer a simple process to clients when I'm working with them to begin doing this. And the process is this: think about what you want to say, determine what you want to say, turn the microphone on, say it, turn the microphone off, check it to make sure it's what you wanted to say, and then proceed on again. Now, I know that might seem very simple, but the challenge that most people have when they start using speech recognition is they're just not used to it. And particularly if you're looking at a writing process where you would normally type and say no, then you'd backspace and change it, and then you type some more, and then you go no, and you backspace, and you stop and you think. If you were to leave your microphone on the entire time using speech recognition and using that process, you'd end up with a mess on your machine. And so it's really one of those things that just takes practice for a person to become comfortable with. And even if you use it for just simple tasks, I know a lot of folks that use it just for texting, right? It's a quick way, it's a simpler way to get some information to somebody without having to type on those tiny keys on a phone. So really keep in mind, you can find these features the built-in ones by going through the accessibility options that are available either through Mac or Windows computers or those other options I suggested. Moving forward, I just mentioned something called accessibility features. So within the operating systems of Mac and Windows, there is something called accessibility options. And the easiest way to find them is just type it into the search, either on the Finder on the Mac or the search tool in Windows. But there are a number of features that can be changed there that might help a person who's having issues with typing. So one of them is called slow keys or filter keys. I'm sorry, I don't have filter keys on there. In Windows, it's called filter keys. And you'd go into that setting, and when you turn it on, what it allows you to do is to disregard a keystroke that's not held down for a specific amount of time. So if a person is going to type and they're trying to hit the J, but they accidentally hit K on the way, with this feature turned on, unless they held that K key down for a period of time, it wouldn't register. So I can slightly touch another key or press it down until I get to the one that I'm looking for and hold it. It can take a little time to get used to this feature, but for folks who are just a little inaccurate and accidentally strike keys, it can be a very effective way of helping increase typing speed by reducing the number of errors that occur. Repeat keys is a related feature, and what it does is it prevents you from getting multiple keys printed on the screen when you hold the key down. So sometimes a person has more difficulty striking the key. Sometimes a person has more difficulty releasing the key. And that's something we don't think about as often. So if releasing the key in time is a problem, we could turn on repeat keys so that a key wouldn't repeat unless you lifted your finger completely off the key and went back down and pushed it again. Okay. All right, so let's move away from keyboards and start talking about the mouse, which probably is used as much or more now on computers. For folks that use laptops, they typically have the built-in trackpad, which is a stationary feature, which might work better for folks with Parkinson's. But for folks that are using desktop computers, they typically come with a standard mouse. And the issue that can happen when using a mouse is that those larger movements needed to move that mouse on top of the desktop. And for some folks, that might be a challenge, and they might benefit from something that stays in one place and just using fingers to manipulate it. Well, that's the beauty of a trackball. And when using a trackball, your fingers stay in one spot. Okay. I want to see something here. Okay. Next up, is another entirely different way of using the computer, and that's using a head mouse. So looking at the image on the screen here on the top, we see a person which looks like a weird pair of glasses and a switch that he has in his mouth. And what that is actually is a head mouse. So for a person who's got more severe involvement of their upper extremities and are unable to use them the way they want, a head mouse could be an alternative to helping them access the computer. So the way it works is you wear it on your head and you use your head movements to control the movement of the mouse. All right. Now, clicking can be done a number of ways. One of them is by using some form of switch. And in this case, the switch is what you see in the person's mouth. So instead of clicking a button on a mouse, the person would bite down lightly on this switch, which has a nice rubber cover on it, and they would end up doing their clicks that way. Another option we're looking at to your left here is a device that's called the AMA Neo. It's made in Germany. It's not incredibly prominent here, but I've had some success with it with clients. And really what it's about is you would connect your mouse to it, and then that would connect to your computer. And what it does is that it's electronically able to dampen tremors that might be occurring when using the mouse. So while your hand might be shaking on the mouse, the cursor would be reduced in the amount of shaking that it's doing on the screen. In the bottom right-hand corner, we see another tool that's called the roller mouse. And again, another option where in this case, there's a bar right here that the person moves up and down and left and right to control the mouse cursor. And then he has the buttons down here that they can click on to make their selections. Okay. All right. just like we had alternatives for keyboards and adaptations, we also have adaptations that we can do with the computer mouse. So again, going into the control panel or settings in a Windows computer and settings on a Macintosh computer, there are some things that we can change for the mouse settings that can help impact or make it easier to use or more customized to the individual. So one of the things that I start with most clients is the tracking or cursor speed, and that's how fast the cursor moves across the screen. Now, when you move the mouse, you do control the speed, but if we adjust it to be slower, a big fast movement would result in less movement across the screen, all right? Or if we turn the speed up, a little bit of movement could result in the cursor going across the screen quicker. In the case of most persons with Parkinson's, I would think that turning the cursor speed down would be the more appropriate way or the more beneficial adjustment that could be made for them. Something else that can be adjusted is the double click speed that a person has. And so recognizing, we all know that to open a file or to open an icon, we double click on it. Depending on the person and the physical symptoms they might be demonstrating, that double click might be difficult for them to make. And one of the things that we can do, and you see it here circled, is that we can turn that speed down so that a double click could be achieved by going click, click, instead of click, click, like we're used to. Okay. And then finally, mouse keys is another, it's an adaptation, but it's an alternative. And when we turn mouse keys on, if a person has a full-sized extended keyboard, which also has a number pad, with mouse keys on, the number pad acts like a joystick, and the mouse cursor can be controlled that way. So if we go 9, 8, 7, if I push 9, the mouse would go up and to the left. If I pushed 7, it would go up and to the right. Clicking would be done with the key in the center, which I think is what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sorry, I don't have an extended keyboard in front of me. But that's how that would work. The benefit of that would be that if a person is using the regular keyboard and their hands are on the keyboard, they could mouse without taking their hands completely off the keyboard and reaching over to it. Okay. What I'm hoping that folks will take away from this discussion is that there are a variety of ways that we can make adjustments. And there's no one answer for anybody, but to be aware of some of these variations or changes that can occur might just open the door to you finding out what could work, or at least make things a little better or improved. All right, let's talk about mobile devices. A couple of years ago, my occupational therapy students and I were working with our regional APDA center, and we hosted an open house to talk about this topic, computer access. And we had a whole bunch of computers set up, and we had all the keyboards and the mice and all the things. And then I was sitting at a small table to talk about using mobile devices, phones and tablets. And I think we had about 25 people show up. And I think 2 of them went to the computers and everybody else came over to talk about the mobile devices. And this was several years ago. And so I recognize that if it was that popular then, I know it's even more popular now. We recognize that the cell phone has just become an integrated part of our lives. It's like putting on shoes. You put your phone in your pocket and it's with you all the time, and you're using it for multiple functions. But we also recognize that the limitation to mobile devices for a person who has upper extremity incoordination or manipulation issues or tremors is managing those small icons and typing on those small keys and managing the small buttons that are on the sides of these devices. And so we're going to look at some settings that can be changed here, as well as some possible alternative things that a person could do, just like we did with the computer. So let's start with Apple devices. Apple's operating system for its phone and for iPad is referred to as the iOS. And just like in the computers, it has built-in accessibility features that can be turned on or adjusted to help people out who have different needs. So this one's not so much about accessing the device, but just might be helpful to folks. And that is, and by the way, we will be talking about Android next for those of you that have Androids. I forgot to give you that heads up. One of the things that we can do to help people process information on their devices is to have text converted to speech so that you can listen to it instead of having to read it. And this isn't necessarily something that's associated with Parkinson's, but just might be something that makes using a smaller device easier for folks. And so on iOS, there's something called Speak Selection, and there's also something called Speak Screen. The way Speak Selection works is if you're looking at, let's say, a piece of text content from a web page, you would put your finger on it, select it, and drag to select all the text you wanted, and then a speech button would pop up like you see right here, and you'd click Speak, and then you would get a synthetic or artificial computer speech reading that content back to you. All right, and so that might be a better alternative for some people than making it bigger if the issue is just having difficulty seeing it. A related feature that works similar but is a little more useful for when you want to read a whole page or cover something that way, and that's a feature called Speak Screen. And the way it works is that on your device, you touch your finger, hold it, and drag down, and then you'll see this play bar appear, which will then allow you to hit play and listen to that entire page being read. You still always have the option of stopping it, but you can still do that. And so those are called Speak Selection and Speak Screen. All right, continuing on with some issues that might be related to vision or alternatives to vision. On iOS, there's something called Zoom, and there's something called Magnifier and then larger text. Zoom, as it would sound, is a feature that allows you to zoom in on a device. Just like you all know that you can pinch to expand or come down, Zoom would work the same way. You do a triple tap to activate Zoom, and then you would spread your fingers apart, and it would then zoom in on whatever it is that you're trying to see. And that works on any screen, not just like on a web page or expanding it. So any screen you're on, it would allow that to do. Magnifier, basically, I'm going to tell you about, is a way to use your phone or tablet as a magnifying lens. And when you use the magnifier app, you would turn that feature on, hold your phone over what it is you're trying to read, and you would then see that magnified on your phone screen or on your computer, on your tablet screen. Okay. And then larger text, I think, is something that's used by any of us who are now 55 years or older, because it's just harder and harder to see things. And that's just a simple setting where you go in to make all the text on your screen larger. So it wouldn't matter if you're opening an email, looking at a web page, or a text message, all the text would be bigger. I'm sorry, I'm pausing a second. I see some questions that have been coming in. And I'm just reading that so I can respond to them as I get to them. There's one question here about an Apple Watch. And I think Apple Watches can be a real challenge for persons with Parkinson's just because of the small interface of that screen and trying to access it. So unfortunately, I don't know that I've got a real quick solution for anybody. And then there's a question also coming up about Alexas, and I'm going to cover that content in a second, so I'll hold that one till then. So another feature on iOS is something called Assistive Touch. And Assistive Touch, when turned on, puts this little square button on your screen. And you see it right here. And you can move that button around. But the purpose of the button is that when you select it, it gives you access to features that are typically related to manipulation and hard to do. So for example, on an iPhone, the volume buttons are, it's not working. The volume buttons are really small. And we know that might be hard to turn the volume up or down. In this case, you would touch Assistive Touch, and then you would have a button to go to where you turn the volume up or turn the volume down just by touching that on the screen, making it easier. I know some of you know that to do a screenshot on a phone, you have to hold down two buttons at once and click. So there's a feature here where you would just touch this button and it would take the screenshot for you. So if you have an iPhone, an Apple phone, I would really encourage you to investigate this touch feature because I think it could make some of those little day-to-day tasks a lot easier. All right, and finally, older iPhones still have a home button, and the newer ones don't, but on the older ones, there's that home button. And just like the mouse click we discussed earlier, that home button can be difficult for folks to do sometimes if they have to do a double click on it. And so you can adjust the speed to slower for how fast you have to push that home button down to make it do what you want it to do. All right. Now, touch accommodations are the final thing I'll talk about. And touch accommodations are very similar to those slow keys or filter keys I talked about just a little bit ago on the computer. And what they do is allow you to try to fine tune how long you have to hold down on an object on a phone to select it. So you see hold duration is one of the things, or that same thing about ignore repeating. If you tapped on something twice, it would ignore the repeat or for holding it down. And so those features are there also. I would share with you that when it comes to like the touch features or the filter keys on a computer, that can take a little bit of expertise. And if you're trying to use those features and you find difficulty with it, I would really encourage you to seek out a professional who might be able to help you a little bit. I've been playing with these features for a long time and still recognize that it's not as simple as saying, oh, I'm just going to turn this on and it'll take care of all the issues. All right. Also, we on the Apple phone, we know that they have that feature called Siri, that name that we know all about, where you can use it as your assistant to do things. And that might be easier than any of the touch features we've talked about. And so we know that when that feature is activated and turned on, and by the way, there are different ways to do it. So it wouldn't listen to you unless you said, hey, Siri, or you can do it by pushing a button, whatever works for the person. But then we know that we can command it or ask it to do the things we want. So we can say, Siri, open up text messaging. Siri, open up my mail. Siri, what's on my calendar today at 9 o'clock? And it can report and share that information with you. I think the biggest challenge that people have when it comes to using that feature is just not knowing what to say. And so taking time to go through a list of commands, you can look that up on the internet. What are the Siri commands? Would probably be the best way to help a person. And then really think about what are the ones I really want to use? And then to get somebody to help you write those down or write them down yourself so that you've got access to them when you want to use them. Again, when we're trying to do things, when we're trying to control things on a computer or a phone with our voice, I think the biggest thing that can help somebody is to have it written down for them to reference it so that they can see it. Okay. And then dictation is the built-in speech recognition feature on an iPhone. And so it basically, when it's enabled, you go into the keyboard settings, and when you enable it, it then allows you to enter information using your voice, which we talked about before with the computer. And so it's a very effective tool, particularly for short messages, texting, things of that nature. Okay. Recognize also that voice can also be used to control all the features of a phone. So commanding it where to go, you do editing and that sort of thing, but recognize that's another level of expertise that really comes with some training and practice for a lot of people. Okay. But never underestimate the power of YouTube videos or the Apple page. If we're talking about Apple products, there are tons of videos out there that also I find really effective ways to help learn how to do stuff. All right, so now we're going to switch to the Android. And I always tell everybody, I know about Android features, but I'm just not as versed in them because I've been an iPhone user my entire life. And I learned the other one because I've had to help people do it, but I'm just not quite as good, but I can still steer you in the right direction. One of the other things just to note about Android accessibility features, and Android is the operating system that the other phones use, like Samsungs and Motorola's and whoever else is making those now, Samsung being the biggest one out there, I believe. But depending on the model of phone or the brand of phone, the way the Android is set up, the operating system is a little different sometimes. So how to get to it can vary just a little bit within these. So coming basically the same features that I just talked about with the iPhone on the Android. So if you want to have text read to you on your phone, be it a web page or a menu or a text message, you can use that select to speak feature that we talked about on the iPhone. You would simply select it and then it would be spoken. And the way you find this is to go through what Android calls its accessibility suite, which you access going through the settings button on the phone. Okay. I will say this, the coolest feature as far as I'm concerned on an Android device that I think really fosters accessibility is this high contrast keyboard. And that's the picture you see right here. And when you go into the Android, you go to settings, you go to accessibility features, you go to vision, and you'll see the high contrast keyboard is an option that you can select. And the keys are a little bigger. They're very, very bright. And I find it just really a nice tool to use to type in information. Just like we discussed earlier, we can also increase font size. You go to the vision choice under accessibility, and that's where you would find that, increasing it. And then finally, magnification, that same idea about how we can, by tapping the magnify what's on the screen or zoom in and zoom out. Okay. And again, another thing about this is that the hardest part sometimes is, okay, Bob, you just said these things, but where do I find them? How can I find them? And continue to use the search features on your devices, and that's usually the quickest way to get to it and find it. If not, again, using the web page to search for how do I make fonts bigger on an Android phone will also help you get there. The assistive touch feature that I touched, that little button that appears on the screen on the iPhone, on an Android device, they have a similar thing, and they call it the assistant menu. And you'll see it here. This is what it will look like if it was turned on your Android phone. And when you press it, you get other buttons to then give you options about what you want to do, including this one says return to the home screen, or go to some specific app that you want to open that makes it easier to do that. So again, it's limiting your ability to have to try to manipulate things with your finger, move to it, and go through this one-step interface to kind of get to things that way. All right. And then when it comes to speech control, I'm learning you can have a couple of options. So when using the Android, there's something called the Google Voice Access, but then certain models of phone will also have their own speech control as well. But the Android one is called Voice Access. And when it's turned on, it would act just like the Siri feature does on an iPhone. And so you can use it to say, open my calendar. You can use it to open a specific app. The trick is knowing the names of the things that you want to control and what's the verb that makes that happen, like open my email or read my email to me. All right. And that just takes practice and getting to know the products a little bit more. Excuse me a second. All right. So in the assistive technology business, we like to use fancy words sometimes. When you're looking at this picture, you would probably say, oh, armrests. Well, that whole category is something that we in the computer access area call performance enhancers. So these are things that aren't part of the computer or the phone, but they would be used in conjunction with them that might help improve or enhance performance for the person. Okay. So let's talk about using a keyboard again. And so a couple of things that you see here are a pointer or a typing splint. And you see that right down here. So if a person's unable to make that finger point and they're having a hard time with it, that splint slides over your hand and it leaves you with that nice pointed end there. I happened to check today and it's available on Amazon for like $24, which of course is high, but as most of these things are. The trick is knowing how to find it or search for it. And I think I used the term typing splint and that didn't bring me to it at all. But then I started typing assistive typing device or assistive pointing device for typing. And then that brought up the examples that worked well for me. So please keep that in mind as well, is that companies use different terms or names for this stuff. And is often a variety out there. Now, the other one I think that can be really helpful are these armrests or forearm supports. And you see that in this image right here where this gentleman's got his forearm laying in the forearm support. And those supports attach to the table where the keyboard rests. And so the idea is that by putting your arms in those arm supports, you're not having to work to hold your arm up against gravity. All right. And they sit on nice ball bearing fittings also. So they make the movement back and forth and front and back and side to side a lot easier and smoother. And oftentimes with less effort to hold up arms, better control can come distally with fingers and hands. Okay. A variety of these out here, and many times not even marketed towards folks with disabilities. Okay, so something that's awfully common that I'm sure all of you who have cell phones are aware of are word prediction and word completion or autocorrect. many times people don't like this feature because it starts to correct. Well, the one I don't like is when I'm spelling a word it doesn't know and it corrects it for me. But in many cases, the idea behind this is to reduce the number of keystrokes that you make. And so one of the things we recognize about completion or prediction, and by the way, the difference is that word completion is when you start to type a word, say like you type CA, and then the word cat appears on the list. So you can select cat. All right. But after I selected cat and the word appears like food, that's word prediction. And it's trying to guess what the next word you're going to type is before you even put in a letter. And then as you start to type letters, if it's not on the list, then it goes back to a prediction or completion mode in terms of what it's doing. And these have gotten really sophisticated, and they also adapt to you, the user, and the sorts of files you have. So for example, your last name will start to pop up after you've used it before in a message, that kind of thing. All right. Okay, so next up, let's talk about controlling the environment and what might be available to help folks who are having issues getting up to turn on lamps and do those sorts of things. Okay. So the smart speaker has kind of had a real boom phase, and now they've just kind of become integrated into our lives a little bit. And it's interesting to find out what people use them for. I have several of these smart speakers in my home, and I primarily use them as my radio now. So I'm an NPR listener. So depending on what room I'm in, I'll say, Alexa, play NPR. And I've got NPR coming on a nice little speaker there. I also love it at dinner time when my wife and I sit down to eat. We'll say, Alexa, play Dean Martin, and we'll have Dean Martin dinner music. And that's a nice way to go. And I would probably guess that's what a lot of people use them for, but they can do a lot more than that as well. But sometimes we need some accessories to go along with them to help us do that. Okay. So the two main brands out there are Amazon Echo and the Google Home. They both work great. I think that some of them have their advantages and disadvantages. I would say the strength of the Amazon Echo is the number of applications that it has to go with it. Except they call those, I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on the word all of a sudden. They call those, I'll think of it in a second. It's coming up on another slide. But the Google Home tends to be really good for voice searches of the internet. And so if you've not used one of these devices, you can go up to it and say, Alexa, what's the capital of North Dakota and what's its population? And it'll do that search for you and find it. And my experience has been is that when you're looking for specific internet-based information, the Google Home tends to work really well. But if you're looking for a wider variety of different activities, different things that you can do with the device, Amazon has a much more extensive listing. So from the perspective of a person with Parkinson's disease, how might this be helpful to you? Well, one is that it can help provide a level of safety, assuming that we're able to interact with it effectively with our voice. And I'm going to talk about that more in just a second. But they can be set up so that it works as a voice interface for making phone calls. So for a person who's unable to pick up a phone or manage it, but still does pretty well with their voice, it can serve as an interface to your phone. The thing that I use it for extensively in my kitchen when I'm at home is for an alarm or a timer. And I will say to set the alarm or set this timer for 15 minutes. You can create to-do lists simply by talking to it. Particularly, I'm more familiar with the Amazon product, but I can say create a shopping list. I can say create a list of things that I'm going to do today, and then say them, and it'll have it. And then later on, I'll say, Alexa, what's on my list of things to do? Using a Google Calendar, you can integrate your calendar into it as well. So you could ask it, what's on my calendar to do today? And then I think the feature that really gets into environmental control that I really like is using it to control lights or thermostats or other things. One of the ways that we can do that now pretty inexpensively is that light bulbs are being made now that you can purchase. I've got mine at Costco. I think I got 6 for about $30. And they've got the receiver built into those light bulbs. And so you plug those into your lamp or your light fixture, and then using the Alexa app on your iPad, you set that up and give it a name so that it knows when you say turn on dining room lights, it turns on dining room lights. And then, of course, for the original use of Amazon, which is to shop, they can be really good for shopping as well. So I want to talk a little bit more about safety. And, the thing that I think one of the things we worry about the most, whether we're elderly or whether we have Parkinson's or we're both, is falling. And what happens if nobody's there? And what if I don't have my phone left in my pocket? All right, I'm seeing I've got my 5-minute check here. So there's a great app that I really like, and I will endorse the app. I don't get anything, but I use it for my mother-in-law. And my mother-in-law's got issues with lower extremities, and she has a tendency to fall once or twice a year in her home. And one of the things I did is I put a Amazon Echo, which is the small smart speaker, at one in each end of her home and one in the middle. And then I set her up with the app Ask My Buddy. And if she was to fall and she was in voice range of those devices, which she pretty much is anywhere in the house, she simply has to say, Alexa, ask my buddy to alert everyone. And you would have gone in and programmed that feature in ahead of time of who would get it. And it will send them a text. It'll send them an email. It'll actually even call them up. Now, I think for the free version, you're limited to 3 or 4 people. But if you use the paid version, you can put whatever number of folks you want. And you could even be more specific. You could say, Alexa, ask my buddy to call Bob, and it would do that as well. So that's something to take a look at. And then I'm going to stop there and not go into communication devices. And actually, I want to take a time to look at the questions. I only have a couple minutes left. And one of the persons asked was, for somebody who's got cognitive decline, how do we use the Alexa or the smartwatch or basically any of these things? And the thing that I would say as a way to start with cognitive decline, or even folks who are just older and not familiar with these devices, is to pick one thing. And make it as simple as possible to have them do it. Also, try to be smarter about it. So a great example is that I have 4 lamps in my living room, and I could never remember which one was 1, 2, 3, or 4. So I named each lamp after one of the cats or a pet. So I could say, turn on Luther, turn on Lizzie-Bell. And that was an easier way for me to remember it. And this also can work pretty well for folks who have a hard time enunciating or pronouncing certain words. So go with ones they use, like the name of a friend or a child or something. Turn on Bob, and that might work a little bit better. I find writing things down for people, if they're able to still read and do all that, writing simple directions down. I just set my mother-in-law up with an entirely new TV system. And I had my daughter, her granddaughter, go through it with her. And we wrote down 1, 2, 3 steps of what to do at the time so that we could get through it. But the simplest thing, the most important thing I suggest is start with one thing. Start with one thing that's going to have some impact and keep working on it, and then try adding from there. Even if you're looking at something like dictating with your voice, just work on a simple text message first. Don't try to write a paper or do other things like that. Just start with a simple thing. And then the others, look for some assistance. Sorry, that's my timer going off. I did want to show, if I can, folks, to my last slide, or next to last slide, if they could bring that back up in the control room, please. Hopefully they can get to it. And that's a resource I want you to be aware of. And I've got the 2 here. I'm sorry, it's where I'm at locally. I'm in St. Louis, Missouri. But every state in the United States now has a Tech Act program. So in Missouri, it's called Missouri Assistive Technology. And in Illinois, it's Illinois AT. And then also a broader organization that oversees all the Tech Acts is the National Assistive Technology Act Assistance and Training Center. And that actually is a great resource if you want to try to find the ones in your state. But if you start with Tech Act Center, and then your state, that's a great place to start because they often have the devices I talked about today, and they may have a lending library, or they may have a come and try it out thing. And sometimes they even offer assistance with funding, but at least there are professionals there to help you out. Your local, an occupational therapist and an outpatient center might be another place to start with some of these things as well. So I think I don't see the actual countdown here, but we must be getting pretty close to finishing.
We are. We're basically there. Thank you, Dr. Cunningham. It's amazing what we can do with technology. You're great to share it. I was here in St. Louis when you did that presentation. It was awesome.
Well, you're kind.
And no, it was
I
really
feel bad
great.
about this one because I can't respond to people as easily as I did on that one.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of questions here, and I want to say to everyone, there is a place on the message board where if your question was not answered, you can cut and paste and put it there, and we will try very hard to get back to you. That the Echo Dot, I can't emphasize enough the importance of what you're talking about with Echo. Lots of us have to get up in the middle of the night. It can turn the light on for you.
Yep.
So
That's
you
a great
don't
one.
fall.
And
I remember that.
So many automatic light sensors now too that will but your movement will trigger them and turn them on as well.
Yeah, it's perfect. So, and you'll have all the notes from this as well. I know we could go on all afternoon, Dr. Cunningham, but we have to move on. So I want to just say thank you very much. And all of you will have access to more on this topic. Do use the message board. And remember that you can also call your local APDA. You can call the 1-800 number. That's 1-800-223-2732 to get information about an OT, an occupational therapist near you who can help you with your specific needs. And I recommend that you do that. There's also research on technology, and that would be available on our website. So at this point, I believe we're going to take a quick break. We're going to end this, and thank you so much. I hope you'll come back. And everyone on the show will have about 10 minutes to begin our next set of breakout sessions. So there's lots of options. Go on, take a look on the agenda, pick your next session, and we'll see you soon.
All right. Thanks very much, Kathy.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.